Is the real erroneous, and Ben, yours is
VidKid 2013.
fabulous. So today we're going to be talking about a pretty important conspiracy theory, and that is MK Ultra. So MK Ultra is not so much anymore a conspiracy theory as a proven scientific, well, not so scientific program that was run on the American people, and it started with the CIA. And the whole point of this was to develop procedures to identify drugs, any kind of drug or other abilities that could be used during interrogations to weaken individuals and force confessions through brainwashing and other psychological torture. So the term MK Ultra is a CIA cryptonym. Do you know what a cryptonym is? That's like
No.
a cryptonym is one second. It's like a code name, right? So code words, CIA cryptonyms are code words used by the CIA or Central Intelligence Agency to refer to projects, operations, persons, or agencies. So that's kind of an important word to know because that'll come up in the future as we study conspiracies, I'm sure. Um, So MK Ultra is an arbitrary prefix standing for the Office of Technical Service, and Ultra is an arbitrary word out of a dictionary used to name this project. So what the CIA used to do was they would kind of pick random words to associate with projects so that you couldn't figure out what that project was based on solely talking about the project. You know what I mean? So they would use a lot of funky dunky code words. That's part of, intelligence is covering things. So, let's dig into it a little bit. So the program was widely condemned as a violation of individual rights and an example of the CIA's abuse of power, with critics highlighting its disregard for consent and its corrosive impact on democratic principles. Project MKUltra began in the 1950s and it ran until the 1970s, or so we're told. And that's where we get into the conspiracy theories, because afterwards, MKUltra branches off into a wide range of experiments, delving into everything from mind control to um delving into everything from mind control to manipulation of animals through psychic abilities to all sorts of messed up stuff. So sensory deprivation, electroshock therapy, hypnosis, sexual abuse. These things get really weird. Some of the side projects after MK Ultra are like, the manipulation of celebrities, creating celebrity culture, like so it really branches off into La La Land, or does it? Again, so some of this stuff can be kind of proven, and it's pretty scary. So Project MK Ultra was preceded by a project called Project Artichoke, and it was organized through the CIA's Office of Scientific Intelligence and coordinated with the U.S. Army Biological Warfare Laboratories. The program engaged in illegal activities, including the use of U.S. and Canadian citizens as unwitting test subjects in MK Ultra scope. Was broad activities carried out under the guise of research and more than 80 institutions aside from the military, including colleges, universities, hospitals, prisons, pharmaceutical companies. The CIA operated using front organizations. Although some of the top officials at these institutions were aware of the CIA's involvement. So, some of the things they did were like dosing people with LSD. In fact, they helped fund the experiments that basically gave us LSD, and they thought it could be used as a mind control device. So it was revealed in 1975 that Project MK Ultra was basically a thing by the Church Committee, and that was named after Senator Frank Church from the United States Congress. And basically, investigative efforts were hampered by CIA Director Richard Helms, who ordered that the MK Ultra files be destroyed in 1973. So let's stop. Let's stop. All right. They literally destroyed all of the files. As we study conspiracy theories, I want you to know something. If you learn nothing from this other than this concept right here, know that they destroyed all the files regarding this experiment, so that when some wacko conspiracy theorist comes out and say they did this to me in a mind control experiment and it was a sub product of MK Ultra, we can't really knowingly or wittingly refute that person in good conscience without listening to what they have to say first, because of what we know they did in this experiment, what we do know they did in this experiment. Even though they destroyed all the documents, some of them have come to light, some of them have come to the surface. You know, I have friends in the conspiracy community that have dug very deep into some of these documents with their own eyes, gotten the FOIA request, which is the Freedom of Information Act, pulled out this stuff and really gotten into it, you know, dug to the heart of what was going on here. And it's scary. It's scary that the CIA and our own government would basically conduct operations to figure out if they can control our minds, essentially. So, about 20,000 documents relating to MK Ultra were destroyed after the Senate hearings, and information about MK Ultra was declassified in 2001. However, little has been redacted. Just because it says declassified doesn't mean it means redacted, and much of it has not been redacted. So it all starts with the Nazis, right? And the scientists working in the concentration camps of Auschwitz and Dachau during World War II conducted interrogation experiments on human subjects, substances such as barbiturates and morphine, derivatives and hallucinogens such as mescaline. So they're giving people mescaline. That sounds like a good time. We're employed in experiments.
I don't think you want to say that.
Is Joel saying that? Not even. No.
Continue.
Yeah, no, Nazi mescaline experiments don't sound like a good time. I'm just joking. But so they were hooking up the Ukrainian, the Jewish, and other national prisoners with the aim of these experiments to develop a truth serum. So that's all of this stuff just kind of stems from man wanting the power to tell another man what he knows. You know what I mean? Like, get to the bottom of the truth. Like, but in a really nasty, nasty way. They were trying to interrogate people unlawfully. And that's what Dachau concentration camp was all about. And then after the war ended, the Americans' interest in drug-related interrogation experiments began in about 1943. So they had already started their program, but they weren't really as good as the Nazis at interrogating people. So what they did was they called them up and they brought them over after the war, and they put them to work in a couple different projects. One of them we'll talk about again later. I don't want to get off track, but during this bringing over of these Nazis, they did a couple different projects, and one of them was the beginning of MK Ultra, and the other one was the rocketry program, NASA.
Operation Paperclip?
Yeah, Operation Paperclip was the NASA one. So,
okay.
But this happened across the board. They did this in a variety of ways, and this is not conspiracy. This is history. We know this. This is declassified. Right. So, yeah, this was refuted when I was growing up, Ben. Man, you had to fight people over this fact. You had to tell people this, and then they go, "No, No, it wasn't until 2001 that I mean, I was in high school still fighting with people about this idea. So, I mean, I was already interested in these concepts, and people would go, that didn't. People still had this fervor, especially in 2001, right after 9/11. People had this fervor for America. You couldn't say that, like, for instance, like America started the eugenics wars, but that was such a controversial idea. But now it might slide, publicly a little more. So anyway, after they bring them back over in 47 after the war, they the U.S. Navy starts Project Chatter, which its interrogation program, which saw the first testing of LSD on human subjects. So that's in 1947. So they're testing LSD as far back on people and that's the Navy. The Navy started that. So when we talk about good drugs, my man, that's as early back as we get with the military testing its subjects. So let's get into it. In the 1950s, the Central Intelligence Agency, under direction of General Walter Bedell Smith, initiated a series of interrogation projects involving human subjects, beginning with the launch of Project Bluebird, officially renamed Project Artichoke. So that's the first one. In August of 1951, in the U.S. anyway, directed and overseen by Brigadier General Paul F. Gaynor. The objective of Artichoke was to determine whether an individual could be made involuntarily to perform an act of attempted assassination. So when we talk about, what's a good okay, so like the Manchurian Candidate, you know that movie?
Yeah.
Yeah, the idea of like taking over the brain and getting somebody to assassinate somebody. That is this concept right here.
Oh, you mean like
Project
Lee Harvey
Artichoke.
Oswald?
I don't know if you want to say that out loud on YouTube, but we'll find out. We'll find out how much they're willing to. This is a freedom sensor test right here, I guess. The objective of Artichoke was to. No, I don't think oh no. Anyway, look into that later. The act of attempted assassination, morphine, mescaline, LSD. We went over that already. So okay, let's get into the good stuff. Operation Midnight Climax, Sidney Gottlieb. This is the stuff I love to talk about. The project was headed by Sidney Gottlieb, but began on the order of CIA Director Alan Dulles, who, if you've never looked into Alan Dulles, he is like kind of the backbone of the early CIA, and he's a very interesting and sketchy character. Kind of boring, but very interesting. He's one of these people that is innately boring and insanely rich with detail at the same time. So April 13th
So, very George Lucas.
yeah.
Very George Lucas. All right, I get you.
Yeah. So it's a good call. So it's okay. So Jesus, you got me off track.
Sorry.
So okay. So yeah, he was controlling drugs for the Soviet bloc against controlling mind developing drugs against the Soviets, and the Chinese. He was trying to come up with these mind controlling drugs. So then the Korean War starts, and he wanted to use similar methods on the captains there. Skip forward a little bit, and the researchers found some grants. They finally got some money to actually do some of this stuff because they weren't really like getting hooked up by the government yet, and the project attempted to produce the perfect truth serum. So skip ahead to the Cold War, and they're continuing down the path of just fucking with a bunch of different illicit drugs, and they're just trying to find the perfect concoction. And by the way, I should mention that while they're doing all this, they're testing this on unwitted and unknowing subjects. Oftentimes people who work within the government, but like Debbie in the mailroom, or Tom who makes your coffee in the morning. You know what I mean? Like the lower levels of government society, nurses, they were doing this in hospitals. They were doing this to, pretty much anybody who was like a lower level government employee, the the private, private Timmy Tom, like, hey, here you go, son. Here's your daily injection. And then he goes into a LSD fucking spasm and almost dies. Literally, this happens later. We'll get to it. But so during the Cold War, they started a bunch of sub projects. Subproject 54 was one of them, and we can confirm that one. And Project Confusion was its program name, which was to it used sub-aerial frequency blasts to erase people's memories. They say the program was never carried out. Now, let's say that again. You hear me?
They're claiming that it was never carried out.
So they
on
put
its own
millions
citizens,
of dollars.
or
They put millions of dollars.
in general.
No, not on. No. This is a military project, but we
Oh,
already
okay.
know they did stuff on its own citizens, on our own citizens. But some Project 54 was the Navy's top secret project, and it was its number one top secret project. They poured a bunch of money into it, and then they said, "Oh, it was never carried out." But they basically figured out how to erase memory. So most MK Ultra records were destroyed in 1973 on the order of the CIA. Like we said, Richard Helms got rid of them. And the project began during the period with which Rupert Cornwall, who was a famous journalist, described paranoia at the CIA. So during the Cold War, everybody was just paranoid of spies and shit. And this is during James Jesus Angleton's war. So he was fighting a war on a bunch of different levels, and he believed a mole had penetrated the CIA at the highest levels of the agency. He turned out to be right, but they never caught the particular mole that they were looking for in this instance. But that's a whole other story. And if you're interested in that story, there's a great book called The Secret History of the CIA. So look up that book, because it tells that entire assorted a tale, and it's like 10,000 pages. So obviously we can't get into that now while we're doing one of the biggest subjects we've ever done. But it's a ridiculous program, he later said. And he claimed he didn't look at the primary goal of the research later. Tried to like backtrack that he didn't realize what it was doing. So there's a lot of other related projects. So now we're getting into the meat and potatoes of the conspiracies. MK Search was one of them, and that was a sub-project of MK Ultra program. That's how it gets divided into two projects: MK Often, MK Chickwit. That's commenced in 1965 and ends in 1971. So they give it all these different names and stuff, but it really is one thing, right? But it's ultimately just trying to find different methods and ways to read people's minds. Eventually, we get into some sub-projects that, the film, you're familiar with the film Men Who Stare at Goats? Ben?
Yeah, I'm familiar with it.
Okay, so what were they trying to do in that movie? What was the plot line of that film?
Men Who Stare at Goats. It was about mind control, wasn't it? They were trying to prove that they could control the mind of a goat by staring at it and telepathically telling it to do something.
Yeah, that was one of the plot lines. What were some of the other plot points in that film? Like some of the other stuff that the main characters could do?
I don't know. Have psychic abilities.
Yeah.
I mean, the main guy said that he could read people's minds from time to time. Yep. So, I mean, I guess that counts as psychic abilities.
So one of the things that so there's this split between one of the things we talk about is astral projection. That's when you kind of go in your own mind and kind of use your imagination to create a journey for yourself. You know what I mean? That's astral projection. What they were doing was a thing called remote viewing or astral viewing, where they were actually like, when you remote view, they were actually picking targets. Somebody picks a target for them. That was, if you remember the scene where they were pulling out and he's going, a teacup. It's a teacup. Like the one guy,
Yeah.
Kevin Spacey character goes into, goes into that like British woman's voice and he's like channeling, so to speak, but he's not really because he's a fake and everybody knows it kind of thing. Yeah, that was part of the point, was to like, so they're trying to find people who can like basically see what's behind the curtain. So at some point, they kind of like find some guys that can do some of this stuff. And then we get deeper into some conspiracy theories, but we're getting close to, if not over time now. And there's still a lot of information that we could be digging out of this because it goes on for quite a bit. You know, I believe that I'll give you, before we do our assessment and I give you my breakdown, I'll actually do something I don't normally do, which is to give you my assessment. So I wholeheartedly believe that the U.S. government is, and other governments are, very dangerous, and they want power and they want control. And the only way to get power and control is to assert themselves in ways that take power from other people. So I wholeheartedly believe that the way to look at these experiments is to try and find someone who has some data, survivors, people who claim that they were involved in this, and then unpack their stories and listen to them and give them the honest time of day for their stories. Now, some of these people, they could be mentally ill. They could have issues where they're not telling the truth. But it's really important to sit down and listen to every single human being that says they were affected by this program, because we know it's real and we know it's true and we know that parts of it are absolutely disgusting. Now, that being said, whenever we get into a subject this complex like MK Ultra, it's kind of like the Illuminati, which we'll also do at some point. Once you start to bring it up, it becomes a boogeyman, and people don't understand on any real level how dangerous it is to spread I hate that word, to spread inaccuracies about the subject. So we have to be careful. We have to listen to people. We have to take every account seriously, because there's a lot of wacky conspiracies out there when it comes to this one. Just a lot of wacky ones. So listen with your heart, I guess, and your brain, and use your full body of discernment when it comes to some of the side projects that we'll be talking about later in regard to MK Ultra. Anyway, I've rambled on quite long enough for one day. Ben, what do you think about this conspiracy theory, as always, on a level of 0 being that's not possible and 10 being it's the absolute truth? Where do you think this one falls?
I think that how should we say it? It can't be false for it being the conspiracy that it is. Let's put it that way. Validity, I give it a 7 or an 8. I think that there is we know it's factual evidence that it took place, and we know that people are impacted by it, and it affected people's lives. So, I mean, yeah. Scale from 1 to 10, I go 7 or 8.
All right. So do you have any thoughts on this topic at all? So our own grandfather was involved in the Korean War, and like a lot of these guys were experimented on without their knowledge. what do you think? Hey, what do you think about service members and just regular citizens that were experimented on with things like LSD and random other drugs just for the idea of the government finding a truth serum?
I don't agree with that, but I mean, they're gonna do what they want to do, aren't they?
Yeah, I guess that's a fair assessment. Um, all right, so I think that's gonna be it to wrap it up for today. Thanks for listening to another episode of My Brother Said So, and if you want to hook us up with prizes in the gift shop again, my gamer tag is the real erroneous, and Ben's is VidKid 2013, and we're gonna see you next time. Have a great day.